Hey everyone, this is Cole from Mason Woodshop, and in this video I'm going to be giving you an overview of the DeWalt and Festool cordless track saws. So here we have the DeWalt FlexVolt 60 volt cordless track saw, the DCS520. I've had this for about 2.5 years and I've used it on a wide variety of projects, whether it's cabinetry for the shop, built-ins and closets, or a handful of other cabinetry items around the house. And the Festool TSC 55K, which just came into my shop a couple of weeks ago, and I've been using it quite religiously since then, and I've been very impressed. Now, is the Festool right for everyone? Absolutely not. Is the DeWalt right for everyone? No. So let's take a look at the kits that I bought for each of these. I'll talk through that, give you a little bit of pricing overview, and then we'll get into a couple of the features of the saws, and then finally some sample cuts. And then we'll finish up with a little bit of a conclusion on which one I think is best for various types of woodworkers. Let's take a look. Okay, so now taking a look at the DeWalt, and it does come in this really nice T-Stack case. Now I'm more of a tough system person myself when it comes to DeWalt tools, but T-Stack is still built fairly well and they're a little more compact. And when we take a look inside, you'll see that there's not a lot of room for accessories in here, but we have the manual, we have the saw itself, and we'll take a look at that in a few minutes. We then have the FlexVolt fast charger. So a pretty nice charger, and for me, with a lot of tools on the DeWalt system, I have been using this to charge most of them. Then we have the FlexVolt 60 volt battery. So this is the 6 amp hour version that came with this saw. So pretty beefy battery, weighs a ton, and it's got this little security cap for travel. And then finally, the part of this kit is the 59-inch rail. Now the DeWalt rail is a proprietary rail. It isn't compatible with any of the other systems, but what is cool is that it's a two-sided rail. So we could run the track saw one way, and we could also run it the other way without having to flip the track. So the DeWalt and most of the other brands do require you to flip the track because they only have one side. Now I have mine set up to do 90-degree cuts on one side, and then the other one is calibrated for 45 degrees. So it's a decent track. It's held up pretty well. It does have, very similar to the Festool, it does have these pads on the bottom so it doesn't slip. So you can typically throw it on a sheet of plywood and not worry about clamping it down. But one of the optional accessories that I did buy is a set of these track clamps. Now these track clamps are, I think I bought them on Amazon. You can buy them a lot of other places. They are not cheap. So I think that they are suggested retail price around $129 Canadian or $100 US, but you can find them a lot cheaper typically. So I think I paid about 80 Canadian. It's about the same as about $60 US for the pair. So not too inexpensive, and they work pretty well. So you just slide that on the bottom of the rail. Then you can clamp it down. So pretty easy to use, and yeah, I don't use them all the time, but when I do, they are definitely sufficient. So that's what comes with the DeWalt kit. Now let's take a look at the Festool kit. So before we move to the Festool, I actually want to just talk about pricing for this kit. So including the saw, the T-Stack, the charger, the battery, and the 59-inch rail, that typically retails for around $619 US or about $849 Canadian. And that is one of the kits that they have for the saw, and it's actually, I don't think that they've discontinued this saw, but it's not widely available at a lot of stores right now. So you can check Home Depot, and depending on the store near you, they may have it, but Amazon currently does not sell this track saw, although there is the corded version of this, and you can also get, I believe it's a 102-inch track as well. So there is a kit with the corded version that does have the 59-inch track as well as the 102. But that is not the cordless FlexVolt. So pricing's a bit all over the place, availability is a bit all over the place. Now let's take a look at the Festool. Okay, so now I do have a full unboxing video of the Festool, which I will link above, but let's take a quick look in here. Again, we've got some literature. We've got the saw. We have charger. We have two 18 volt batteries. So these are the 5.2 amp hour Airstream batteries. We actually have a dust bag with the Festool, and the DeWalt does not come with a dust bag, which I find a little odd. And we've got a couple of other accessories in here. one other accessory. Well, we've got a stop for the track so you can stop your cut. And we also have a little clear window which you can alternate between the splinter guard and this window on the saw. And finally for this kit, so this was the Kebi F Plus kit. We have the 1400 millimeter track, which is 55 inches. It is, again, that one-sided track. It does feel a little better than the DeWalt. I think pretty comparable overall. And the Festool tracks are a lot more expensive, but they also come in a lot more sizes. It also has these really nice slippery strips on the top, and on the back, again, we've got the sticky pads that hold it down pretty well. And the optional accessory that I bought for this, and Festool does make a couple of types of clamps, but I bought these quick clamps. Not cheap. I think that they're about $65 a piece Canadian, and I think that they're 40 some US, but they are really quick, really nice. And for me looking to build my own MFT table, these are going to be really helpful in that. So that's the Festool kit. Now let's just compare the saws side by side and walk through a couple of comparable features. All right, so here we have the two saws side by side. Now let's walk through a couple of features. And first of all, you'll probably notice that there's a bit of a style difference. And this is common with track saws where there's this kind of parallel plunge on the DeWalt where you'll see that it goes forward and down. Whereas on the Festool and a lot more of traditional plunger track saws, it mostly just hinges down. So I don't think that there's too much of a difference. I'm not exactly sure if one's beneficial over the other, but that is what we have there. The other thing that you'll notice on the front of the DeWalt are these strips. And what's cool about that, and I've never actually used it, I don't think I would, is that you can put the saw on its side like this if you want to cut the bottom of a door while it's in place. So a pretty cool thing to do. You can also work on the side of a wall, or you can get really nice up and close to a wall. So nice that you can get pretty close with the DeWalt, and that was one of the selling features when this saw came out. So taking a look at kind of the weight, and again, I'm not bringing out a scale necessarily, but they are very similar without the battery. And when the batteries are installed, they aren't too different either. So I haven't noticed too much of a difference. The Festool does glide a little better on the track, so it feels a little easier, whereas sometimes the DeWalt can feel a little clunky, and that can also be attributed to the anti-kickback feature of this tool. So speaking of anti-kickback, both of these have a couple of safety features. I'm going to talk about the DeWalt first. So as you'll see, when I push this down, it's got a full-on riving knife. And I do want to note that both of these saws are thin kerf, I believe. I think we actually have the number on there. Yeah, so 1.93 millimeters is the kerf on the DeWalt, and it does have the riving knife, and it also does have a anti-kickback feature, which if it does sense the kickback, it's not an electronic brake. It's not quite the same as the DeWalt, or sorry, the Festool, but it will kind of grip onto the track so that it's not going to kick back and cause injury. So that's one of the cool things with the DeWalt. It does have that riving knife. And if we take a look at the Festool, now the Festool and the K series of these saws, it does have a really cool mechanized anti-kickback feature. And you'll see that there's actually kind of a couple of LEDs that will light up when the batteries are in here, whether it's activated or not. And that's where kind of what looks like a riving knife here is not a riving knife. This rides along the track, and when it senses that you are going to be experiencing kickback, it will automatically stop and help prevent that kickback. So pretty cool feature on the Festool, although it is a little disappointing that it doesn't have that full-on riving knife, although you do have that protection with the anti-kickback. So taking a look at the back side of these saws, so see that, again, they're very similar. We've got the speed settings on both of them. I don't typically modify the settings too much. I'm generally working with the same type of sheet goods, so I generally have it on max. And when we do power these up, you will get a better sense of some of the noise. Now the dust ports on both of these, so again, the Festool does come with that dust bag, the DeWalt does not. What's very cool and convenient for me though, is that the DeWalt connects perfectly with the Festool dust extractor. So I use the CT MIDI, which is an awesome little dust collector, and it connects flawlessly to that without using any sort of adapter. And then of course with the Festool, it does mount really well. And both of the dust ports are hinged. So the DeWalt is very stiff, so you can position it where you want and then put the dust port in and it's not going to move. Whereas on the Festool, it's much more fluid. So if you are pushing this along and the cord gets stuck, it will pivot a little bit on its own. So now the cutting depth of both of these is 2 1/8 inches or approximately 55 millimeters. They both have 0 to 47 degree bevels, as well as minus, I don't know if the DeWalt goes to -1 or not. Doesn't look like it does, but the Festool does allow you to go to -1. And yeah, the depth of cut is set slightly differently on both these. On the DeWalt, it's got this knob. It's a little frustrating to use and very plasticky, but you can set your depth this way, although you do have to factor in your head the depth of the track itself. So I always found it a little difficult to dial in, whereas on the Festool, hopefully you can see it here, we have this guide, which you just push in and move, and you'll see that it does have two measurements on here where it says FS, that's if you're using a track, and then if you're not using the track and you're just going bare on the wood, it will be the other indentation. So nice to have that on there. I do wish that the DeWalt had that. Now getting these to work on the tracks and calibrate them is basically the exact same. So we've got these little cams on the top that help to dial in these little cam levers on the top that help to dial in the little kind of guides along here. The Festool is a little better, so you'll see that there's the cam, but then it's got these wider strips of plastic that's putting that pressure on. Whereas on the DeWalt, it's really just kind of that, it's gonna be hard for me to show, but that individual cam that you're moving that's going to tighten it up. Although I have never had issues with the DeWalt in that regard. So I'm trying to think of what else to say about these saws. Oh yeah, changing the blade. So changing the blade on the DeWalt's not too bad, although there is a little bit of nuance to it. So if we press this down, move this lock over, then if we, this is what always gets me. Let's plunge down. Okay, that's locking it. See, this one it's always very frustrating. It's got these two mechanisms in this lock release by pushing this forward. Push that down, oh, and then turn that over, which is going to lock the arbor or lock the blade. So you see, oh, it's not moving too much yet. And then if we push this down, there we go. So it's locked into place. There is onboard storage for the Allen key. And we can remove the saw. Why is it not locked? There we go. So now it's locked. Had to push that down. So not too bad. I'm not going to actually take it off right now, but it is a little bit of effort. And just, I find that on the DeWalt, the releases, you get these little bits of plastic and they don't feel that substantial, and you have to put a lot of pressure on them in order to do that. So not my favorite, and I think that's something that Festool is generally known for, is what's called their fast fix. And anything that's green on the Festool typically means that it has a function. So we can basically release this fast fix, push the blade down, it locks into place. Again, we've got onboard storage for the Allen key, and we're good to go. So very, very, very simple on the Festool, and that's something that I definitely appreciate, and I actually did buy a dedicated ripping blade for this, whereas on the DeWalt, I've been using the stock blade ever since I got it, and that's because it is a little clunky to change, and honestly, the reality was I didn't need to change it that often, but the Festool makes it so easy to change that I see no reason not to have the two saws. So as far as other important features, I don't think that there's a lot else to talk about with the DeWalt. Now looking at the Festool, there is a couple of other elements, and I want to talk about the splinter guard here. So you can simply drop this down, have it ride along the top of the piece, and what I find with the Festool is that both sides of the cut are almost perfect. Whereas on the DeWalt, I find that the off-cut side is generally going to be a little bit of a rougher edge, And because of that, I often put painter's tape down on my cut, then I put the track down, and then I make the cut with the DeWalt if I am gonna be using both sides of that cut. So not ideal, but definitely something that I came to be okay with as far as the DeWalt is concerned. So the Festool does have a little bit more flexibility in that regard. And I realized that I forgot to talk about pricing for the Festool. So the Festool comes in Canadian dollars, I think I paid $10.39, so just over $1,000 for the kit, which included the saw, the 55-inch track, the 2 batteries, the charger, and the other accessories in that set. And then I believe it's $7.99 for that set in the US. So you're dealing with, in both countries, about $200 difference for the Festool. You do get the bag and a couple of other small accessories in the kit. But the reality is that it is a decent amount more expensive, and the tracks themselves are going to run you probably about double the price compared to the DeWalt. So the cost of ownership on this is more expensive. The blades are more expensive, but the kind of just like the overall feel of the saw, and I've maybe cut 100 linear feet with this saw so far, and I'm really liking it. Whereas on the DeWalt, I've run thousands of linear feet, and it's been a great saw, built really well, generally very happy with it. The 60-volt battery generally gives a lot of power, and yeah, so pretty happy with both of these. We are, again, dealing with a 1.93 millimeter kerf versus a 1.8 millimeter kerf, so they are both thin kerf saws, and yeah, so both pretty good. So I think we're gonna get a couple of small sheet goods out, as well as a piece of hardwood, just to show you how these cut. We will hook it up to the dust extractor, and then I will give you a little bit of final thoughts. Okay, so we're gonna be plunging just into a little bit of the spare stuff down here, and I'm just gonna dial this into just over 3/4 of an inch. This is 3/4 inch plywood. We're doing a rip cut. So let's do this. Nice clean cut. Nice clean cut on that off cut. Just a little bit that would need to be cleaned up with sanding if this was going to be a usable piece, and that is one of the downsides with the DeWalt, is that you don't have that splinter guard on this side. So let's try it with the Festool. And just to be fair, I am going to be setting it to, it looks like just shy of an inch, which is what I had on the DeWalt, because I don't want to do one shorter than the other. And I'm going to be using the track setting right there. So that FS. And just looking at that DeWalt cut that was covered by the splinter guard, it's really nice. Like that is a fine edge. Like that's not necessarily finish ready, but just a quick 220 just sanding block on there and you'd be good to go. Now, one thing I do want to note with the Festool is that you can just put one battery in and it will work. You'll also just have heard that the dust extractor turned on even though I didn't press anything, and that's because these batteries are Bluetooth enabled. So when it's paired with the dust extractor, as soon as the tool is turned on, it will turn on the dust extractor. So this can work with one 18-volt battery, but it's ideally suited for 2. And so we've got the depth set. Got dust extraction. And let's put the splinter guard down. There we go. And here we go. Okay, now it's not going to show up on camera, so I don't want to worry too much about it, but that splinter guard gives a perfect cut on both sides, or a perfect edge on both sides. So I think that's going to be one of the the things that I really like about this is just that splinter guard and what it can do to give you that clean cut on both sides. So very happy with the results here. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab a piece of hardwood and a cutting board, and we're going to cross cut that and see how these two hold up from a power perspective. Okay, so for this one, we are going to be using walnut, and this is just under 2 inches thick. So we're gonna be close to maxing out the depth of cut on both of the saws. And for this one, let's start with the Festool. And I am going to clamp the track down in both of these cases. And we're just going to be cutting off probably about 1 centimeter on this. So I've already got the Festool set up. Got to change the depth of cut. I'm just going to max this out. So it's going to be very, very close. So this will be interesting. I haven't cut a piece this thick with the Festool yet, so let's get the safety equipment on and see how it goes. Wow. That was like butter. Like I'm very shocked with the power in that saw. And again, I've never tried this with the DeWalt, but that cut through 2-inch thick cross cut on walnut, not that different than it did on 3/4 inch ply. So yeah, very, very happy with that. So let's get the DeWalt set up. Go, track is clamped down. Now the DeWalt should have a bit more power with the battery, and even though it's 60 volt, that's really 54 with a max of 60. But the Festool does have the thinner kerf going for it and a little bit of a smoother operation. But let's get this hooked up. And you'll have noticed hopefully on the video that the dust collection, especially on the walnut cut, was pretty good. So I think the DeWalt kind of touts that 90% dust collection. I think the Festool is about the same. And I'd say that that's probably pretty accurate for both. So let's change that depth of cut. So again, I'm just gonna go all the way down here. And gonna turn on the dust collection manually for it. And we're gonna plunge. Wow. So also surprisingly smooth for cutting something that thick. So very nice. Rough edge though. I think that seems to be the biggest difference, is that the Festool left a very clean edge and the DeWalt quite rough along there. So you'll see a lot of the little furry bits on that cut. So now the Festool wasn't perfect, but pretty close, especially when you're dealing with end grain on walnut. So the Festool definitely wins on that one. It is a little easier to push through the material, but I am pretty impressed with what the DeWalt's able to do on that as well. So let's wrap it up, and I'll tell you which one I think is best, especially when it comes to most folks. Okay, so I think that about does it kind of for that comparison and taking a look at both of these saws. Now, I want to say that I am 100% on board and happy with my decision to go the Festool route, not just for this individual track saw, but for the entire system. Do I think that's for everybody? Absolutely not. It's another battery system to bring into your workflow. If you were interested in the quality of the cut and the saw itself, and even the system, I'd recommend taking a look at the corded version of this. You'll save a couple $100. They do have very similar feature set now with one of the saws that just came out. So if you are looking at a track saw only, I would say consider the Festool and not necessarily the cordless. You can save a little bit of money, but get the same system. Now on the DeWalt side, this is a very, very capable saw. It's awesome that it has that popular battery system. So if you are a DeWalt shop or a contractor that's all DeWalt, then I would say definitely get this saw. It is absolutely phenomenal for what you get. The tracks are very affordable. The kit itself, and then you can get the 102-inch track, really good addition for a lot of those needs. So very capable saw, just not quite as flexible as far as the system is concerned. But where I think this gets very interesting is if I were to do it again, not with the Festool, but when I bought the DeWalt, I would have gone Makita. And I think that this is for a few reasons. And when I bought this one 2.5 years ago, Makita was, I don't think they were just getting started in track saws, but it wasn't yet totally proven. They have quite a handful of track saws, both corded and cordless. Their tracks are compatible with the Festool system, so the saw can work on Festool tracks, the Festool saw can work on Makita tracks, and there are a lot of accessories that you can intermingle between those two different brands. So that is something that's very appealing. The Makita can also be very affordable at, I think, prices very similar to the DeWalt, if not slightly cheaper. You can also get them on pretty big sales. So if you're looking for the best of the best, and this isn't looking at the Mafels and other European brands, but if you're looking for the best of the best, the Festool is really hard to beat. And I am very happy with that decision. If you're looking for kind of that contractor grade, something that's built well, is going to perform well, and it's going to fit your battery system, if you are going cordless, the DeWalt can't really be forgotten. It's a really nice saw, not that easy to find right now. But Makita, now that is probably going to be the one for you to really consider. And I believe Milwaukee is also coming out with their cordless track saw later this fall. So keep an eye on that and we'll see how that one performs. So this isn't meant to be a head-to-head comparison. It's not meant to be a scientific shootout, but hope you got something from this. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are on track saws, the brands. Do you have experience with them, or do you get by with your circular saw with a straight edge or your table saw? But for me, the track saw, whether it was the DeWalt, which has lasted me really well for 2.5 years, or the new Festool, it's a centerpiece for my shop given my focus on cabinetry. So thanks for watching. We'll have more videos soon. I'll definitely be highlighting some of the more nuanced features of the Festool and the entire system in the coming months. In the meantime, leave a comment, like this video, subscribe, all that kind of stuff, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks.